Hello and welcome to the Cubs on Deck podcast. I am one of your hosts. My name is Greg Huss, and today I am joined by another co-host. I think it's the fifth guest co-host we've had in the last 5 episodes. I think joined by Iowa Cubs broadcaster Alex Cohen. Alex, how's it going, buddy?
It's going well. At least you're staying consistent, Greg.
Yeah,
five, that's not bad. That gets you to the Hall of Fame right there.
Consistently inconsistent here. So, I'm glad to be joined by you. I mean, I think the last broadcaster we had on was Sam, doing the Pelicans, and so very, very different covering the brand new guys into the system down in Myrtle Beach compared to what we're seeing up in Iowa. Guys that we're very familiar with, guys that are some MLB vets, some prospects that have been around for a hot minute, but. Man, I'm excited to have you on. We got a full note sheet here today, plenty to talk about. You're over in Indianapolis. I thank you for coming on before the final game of the Indy series. How's it been over in Indy?
It's been fun. I mean, this is a completely different team than it was 3 weeks ago or when we've been talking. I mean, when we got done, April was the best offensive team in the International League, really the best offensive team in minor league baseball. And you lose Matt Mervis and you lose Christopher Morel, and now you lose Edwin Rios, Mike Talkman, and Miles Mastrobuoni. It's become a different team. It's more timely hitting. Now we get a lot more starting pitching back, and we're getting Kyle Hendricks rehabbing with us for 5 starts. You get Hayden Wesneski back. You get the Ben Brown show here. So it's turned from a hitting team to a pitching team, but sometimes happens over the course of an entire season, but not normally over the course of 3 weeks.
Yeah, that's been kind of wild, honestly, seeing the difference in the team so quickly. But you're playing over in Indy. You've had some pretty good crowds over in Indy this week, I've noticed. It's been kind of fun.
Well, our largest crowd last year was here at Indy last year as well. So that was on July 4th. They had like 13,500 fans on July 4th. And they had a kids' day on Thursday where they had like 13,000 fans. So, a 13,000 person crowd on July 4th last year is a little bit different than 13,000 screaming kids. And then last night, we had the doubleheader, and maybe it was the Kyle Hendricks effect. Maybe it was just really nice out after a rainy day on Friday, but they got 12,000 people. It's a great minor league atmosphere. You're right downtown. It's a 26-year-old ballpark that looks like a 6-year-old ballpark. It's aged well, open spaces, a lot of room to roam around, 2 decks. I like the atmosphere here in Indianapolis. I also like the fact that we swept the doubleheader too. So
I tweeted out a couple days ago. It was actually after the education day, but it pertains to this day too. How in one game, your guys' game had more attendance than the entire series from Oakland versus the Diamondbacks. That's a completely different thing. We could probably talk about that for a long time. We're not going to. Let's go ahead and dig into the topics that we have here. I think that I want to start. We have a little bit of a downer and a little bit of a positive, a very positive to start the show off. Yeah. Let's start with the kind of downer. We'll get right into it here. Sure. I'm a little worried about Caleb Kilian, dude. Like I'm worried about what we've seen with Caleb Kilian up in the major leagues, and I'm not loving what I've seen with him down in Iowa. But I want to get your perspective. Talk me off the ledge with Caleb Kilian, because I know that there's a lot of fans out there that are just kind of throwing him by the wayside. They're done with Caleb Kilian on their top prospect list, all that good stuff. But I think I want you to talk me off the ledge and all fans off the ledge to a certain degree here.
I look at it a little bit differently. Obviously, the end result in Miami last month is not what you want. He really struggled in the first inning. And that's something that if it happened last year or even earlier this year, I would have expected him to be out after 1 inning. But he comes back and he throws a second inning scoreless, third inning scoreless, and gives them 2 quality innings. And I've seen a change of him down here since. The velocity's back up. He's attacking a lot more. He's not walking as many hitters. He's throwing more off, the 4-seamer and the sinker. I mean, hit 98.9 miles per hour in his last start. Or 2 starts ago before Indianapolis. So, I like it a little bit more. I still think that, he needs to pitch a little bit more off his cutter. And I think he said that before too. But there's a different mentality now with him being down here saying, you know what? I went to the big leagues. I heard David Ross's comments. I was really pissed off after that first inning. I'm going to go out there and just throw and understand that I'm a 6'6" righty who could throw 98 miles per hour at any given time. You know what? If I walk a guy, I walk a guy. If they hit me, they hit me. But I have that stuff, and it's been a nice change for Caleb. I think obviously the control needs to be a little bit better. I think there needs to be more quality strikes. I think there needs to be still a little bit more aggressiveness, and I think he thinks that too. But I've been pretty impressed with him over his last 3 starts. I think he's looked a lot better. I think he's looked like the Caleb Kilian of last year. Now, I've been on the broadcasts and podcasts and said that I think that he looks like a number 2 and Jack Flaherty. I think the stuff still plays like Jack Flaherty. Vintage Jack Flaherty, because he's struggling right now with the Cardinals too. I think at 95, 97, he still misses a lot of bats. I think he could throw 4 different pitches. He's got that nice looping curveball that he occasionally throws that possibly he could throw a little bit more of. He's throwing more sliders than cutters right now. In his last start at Principal Park, he had 16 swings and misses. So he's still missing a lot of bats. I think the stuff is there. I still think he's a big league guy. I still think he's a 4 or 5 or middle of the rotation guy. But that being said, if the Cubs go to him and say, hey, I want you to be a 1-2 inning long reliever or 8th inning guy, that throws 98. The velocity's there. So there's a lot of options with Caleb Kilian. He's 25 years old, just his 2nd full season in the Cubs organization. That's me talking you off the ledge. I think he's been a lot better over here over the last 2 weeks. And I do think the aggressiveness and the attacking is starting to get there.
Yeah, you mentioned the 16 swings and misses, his last outing. To me, that's the big thing with Kilian. Like, we need to keep seeing that, because he needs to show that have that confidence going into the zone that he can continue to get swings and misses with his pitches in the zone. It's wild how much he has changed from year to year since he's been in the system, right? When he was acquired, he was the sinker cutter guy, right? Where he had the 2 different types of fastballs that were both really strong. He lived in the zone with them. And then he turned into, he's got this new spike curve, when spike curves were the crazy fad, right? Yes. And he utilized that, and then his stuff started to get better, but he was not in the zone. And it's just, we've seen you can typically identify, even with the crazy development paths of players through the minor leagues.
50 Shades of Caleb,
Yeah. It's typically you can say, this is what this guy's about as he's coming up to the system. And it's I don't know what Caleb Kilian's thing is. You know what I mean? And I think it's
you don't really have to. And that's the thing that I want people to recognize. He's 25. This is his 2nd year in the organization. He was a fringe top 30 guy with the Giants. You still have time to figure that out. This isn't a 27-year-old 4A player. This is a guy who just turned 25. He's one of the top 5 youngest players on this team. There's still an opportunity for time to be had and for patience to be had, which is easier said than done.
Yeah, this is why I wanted you to talk about it, because I think it's important, because I think that I am one of the more positive people regarding prospects in the system. And so if I was feeling this way, I know that other people are feeling this way about Caleb Kilian. So to get that perspective on him is pretty huge. But let's go ahead and transition to a guy that he's throwing to behind the plate in Miguel Amaya, who has been since. So Miguel Amaya was in AA Tennessee. He got called up to the big leagues. When he was up in the big leagues, it was there by emergency when Yan Gomes went on the IL. When he was up there, heard nothing but positive things about the way he manages the game, which is perfectly in line with what I've heard with him coming up to the system for the past 20 years, it feels like. And he did great. He made really good contact with the ball up at the major leagues, and then was sent down but still promoted up to Iowa. That dynamic is really funny.
A weird dynamic for sure.
What have you seen from Miguel Amaya? I mean, I know that he's hitting the ball again really hard. I've got his AAA or his season long numbers, I guess.
He's 7 for 19 at the AAA level. He started off his AAA tenure 0 for 6 with 5 Ks, and then the next day he comes out and he goes 4 for 4 with 2 doubles and 2 singles. He had a big RBI double for us in game 1 yesterday. We were down 1-0 in the 6th inning, down to our final 4 outs, and he ropes one off the left field wall, ties up the game. Cubs end up winning 2-1. Everything is loud. He had a ground out in his first at bat that was 107 miles per hour. He's just big, strong, good lower half. And you look at the swing, it's just so clean. And I know that's something that he worked on a lot coming off the injury going into the 2022 season. Not as much motion, not as much of a leg kick, not as much movement in his swing, and it's really paid off, in my opinion. He's a pretty impressive player. And you tend to forget that number 1 prospect for the Cubs in 2018, Miguel Amaya. Number 1 prospect for the Cubs in 2019, Miguel Amaya. Number 1 prospect for the Cubs in the shortened 2020 season when there was no minor league season, Miguel Amaya. There is a reason that he was a top 100 prospect for 2.5 years. He's had a lot of injuries. He's only 24.
Yeah.
He's a 24-year-old catcher with not as much wear and tear on his knees. His knees are fine. It's all the other stuff.
Yeah.
I like him a lot. I think he's an impressive player, and you just hear the veterans talk about it. And when guys like Kyle Hendricks sing your praises for 5 minutes, you listen. You take that for what it's worth, and it's important.
Yeah, I think it's important to remember that Miguel Amaya dropped down prospect list not because of poor performance.
It was health.
It was only health. Yeah,
based on an arm injury and an ankle injury, and not based off of production.
Yeah, and it wasn't even necessarily because he wasn't on. I'm trying to figure out how to phrase this right. It wasn't because he wasn't on the field. It was because how is he going to bounce back from those injuries? Right.
Mm-hmm.
It's not because he just can't stay on the field. It's like it's because he had some serious injuries that it's like, all right, how do you bounce back from? It's the Ed Howard situation. It's Alex Canario situation. It's that where it's like, how do they return from these serious injuries? You know,
and especially for a catcher having an arm injury, you want to make that you still got some doubt a second. You know, you want to make sure that it's still, you can still throw out guys at a 12 to 20% clip. Like, that's really important.
So let's reframe the Miguel Amaya, like how we look at Miguel Amaya here, right? So he's showing off the arm on the pop time down to second base. We saw that this week several times.
Yes.
We've seen him be able to manage pitching staffs. We've heard that from guys already in the major leagues. We've heard that coming up to the system. That is something we are not at all concerned about.
Mm-hmm.
The defense looks strong considering he's been not back there for the past 2 years.
Correct.
And the bat, you mentioned the way that he is hitting just looks different than the old Miguel Amaya, right? He adapted to that new way of hitting last year where he's a lot different setup, smoother at the plate, showing off that ability to hit for power in games as opposed to just in batting practice. I think reframing him, I think that he may not be the number one prospect because the system is way, way stronger than it was a few years ago. But I think you're pretty close to looking at a top 10 at least guy in the system yet again.
No, and he's a complete catcher. I mean, there's no doubt in my mind that he is, big league caliber catcher right now, just with the way that he handles games, handles staffs, ability behind the plate. Right now, he's got some raw power too. I mean, you saw the 4 home runs in Tennessee. He had the double yesterday. It was on a pretty good pitch too. So, there's no doubt in my mind that he could play at the big league level right now and serve as a backup catcher. But right now the Cubs are in a good spot. They have Yan Gomes who's playing at an all-star level. And then you have Tucker Barnhart, who they love as a veteran presence. So it's a good position to be in where you can get Amaya here, getting every day at bats for what seems like the first time in a decade. And I think that he's in a really good spot.
You know what's the wildest part is that he's not really off track in terms of age for catchers where they should be. He missed all that time, but like catchers take longer to develop. You know, like typically they're coming up to the big leagues at if you're a decent prospect, you're still coming up at 24, 25, 26, 27. And he's not really off the path for that timeline.
But Buster Posey made his big league debut at 23. He's a Hall of Famer.
Yeah.
I mean, not everybody can be Joe Mauer.
Yeah.
Not everybody can be Joe Mauer, come up at 21. Not everybody could be Juan Soto, Vladimir Guerrero Jr. And there is an expectation when you see those players is that is the norm when it comes to prospects. Guess what? It's not. It's not the norm.
It cracks me up. Like this is more than a Miguel Amaya situation, but like it cracks me up the estimated timeline, the ETA that we see put on players, especially players that are like down in Myrtle Beach, right? Or even like South Bend. It's like they have a 2025 timeline. It's like, yeah, well, like that's assuming they go on like a 1 year per level type thing. Guys spend multiple times in Iowa. Guys spend multiple years in between Tennessee and Iowa.
Four guys go through 4 systems in a year. I mean, you have Jeremiah Estrada who started the year in high A last year and made it to the big leagues, and now starting to have it up in the big leagues yesterday. So.
And it's also like what is that ETA when they make their MLB debut? Is the ETA when they like get established at the big league level? Because there's a difference between those two things. Like Ian Happ is a guy that went back down to Iowa to work on things, and now he's gonna have like
scattered the timeline.
Yeah, it's weird. It's a weird like, oh, when will we see this guy in Chicago? Man, I don't know. Like,
It's also based on who you have in the big leagues. Like Nelson Velasquez should be in the big leagues with some team. But the fact is you have your 2 corner outfielder signed until 2026, and then you signed Cody Bellinger, who's playing at an all-star level. Nelson Velasquez is a big league outfielder, and the reason that he's not is not an indictment on him.
Or how the team is performing at the big league level, right? If they're in the playoff hunt, we might see Luke Little and Daniel Palencia working out of the bullpen for the Chicago Cubs this year. If they're not, if the Cubs fall out of contention, they end up selling at the deadline, whatever, you're not going to see Luke Little and Daniel Palencia. Like there's no chance you see them in Chicago if the team is not competing. If the team is competing, you have 2 guys that are flamethrowers that might make sense for a playoff run. I don't know. It's just it's so dependent on so many different things, and it makes it so difficult to identify those like timelines for players.
You are preaching to the choir on that.
All right, man. Let's go ahead and transition from a guy, Miguel Amaya, that's shooting up prospect list for one reason, to a guy that is falling down a little bit. But I'm curious to get your take on Brennen Davis, because I'm still a believer in Brennen Davis. I am kind of preaching patience as much as possible with Brennen. Season long, the stats obviously on the surface aren't very pretty. He's slashing 189 with a 310 OBP. It's slugging only 287. Not great stats overall, but he's also limiting the strikeouts. He's getting a bit of walks. I'm curious about your perspective on like his approach to the plate, what you're kind of seeing from Brennen overall.
I really like the drop in the strikeouts. I think that's pretty important for a young prospect. I know when you see 189, you're not very happy, but that's normally accompanied by anywhere between a 29 and 35% strikeout rate, and even more than that. Brennan's strikeout rate is around 15, and over the last 20 games, it's 12. He doesn't strike out. The BABIP numbers, the BABIP gods have not been all that kind to him. Yeah, there's still some fluidity stuff that he's trying to work out. Remember, I mean, he had a pretty serious injury last year. So you want to get rid of that stiffness in the back. You want to be able to have a fluid swing. What I'm happy with is he's playing every day. I threw out a guy at the plate yesterday. I think the arm really plays with Brennen. I mean, he's had a couple outfield assists since he's been with the I-Cubs that you're just like, whoa, I thought that this guy was just a pure hitting prospect. And he's not. I mean, the arm absolutely plays at the corners, and it's live. I mean, it was a great throw yesterday. So I think the fact that he's not striking out, and, the BABIP gods can be a little bit cruel sometimes. I think that he's drawing walks. He leads the team in hit by pitches, which could be a product of luck or just the fact of how he's positioned at the plate. It's also
Stop hitting Brennen Davis. Stop hitting him.
Yeah, but he's also stealing bags. I mean, he's on pace for over 20 stolen bases. So there's some peripherals there that I really like. I would like to see him hit a little bit, have a little bit harder contact. He went 0 for 4 yesterday, and obviously he didn't strike out, but he popped out a couple times, then a deep fly out to right field. But then you have the other night when he went 0 for 3 and he had an RBI ground out and he flew out to the warning track in right center in a hitter's park. So you really got to be able to balance that out. I think if Brennen Davis had a 25 to 30% strikeout rate, I'd have a little bit more concern. But it's 15. I'm not that concerned, in my opinion.
Yeah. I'm not going to sit here and say that it's been a successful season for Brennen, but
I think it's been a successful season because he's playing.
Yeah. Well, yeah. That's absolutely true. But I think from the perspective of like, I talk about a lot how the development path like is not linear, but it's also not like you work on specific things before, and then you master that, and then you move on to the next thing. And I think right now it's really, really impressive that he's dropped that strikeout rate. That's not an easy thing to do. That is not a normal thing.
And not an easy thing to do at 23.
Yeah.
Well, you want to know who the youngest player on the Iowa Cubs is? Brennen Davis. He's the youngest player on the team by a good 6 months. So also, like, there's your timeline right there. You say, oh, he was a number 1 prospect and he was in the futures game at 21. He should be in the big leagues at 23. Who says that? Is that etched in stone? Like, no. Yeah. Like, the fact is he's 23. He's 2.5 years younger than the average AAA player. Like, he doesn't have to go up and play right now because you have Ian Happ signed till 2026. You have Seiya Suzuki signed till 2026. Guess what? Brennen Davis isn't playing center field. So the two positions that you're locked up at for the next 3 years, you're a little blocked. So let Brennen Davis come down here, figure his stuff out, improve his defense in the corners, and let him take his time.
Brennen Davis could be in. So this is his second year that he's been in Iowa.
So he's with Iowa at the end of 2021 in August. And then you started off the season here last year, obviously was out for 4 months, finished the season with us, and now with the I-Cup. So, yeah, technically it's his third year, but really his third month.
Completely different like situation, but it reminds me a little bit of Matt Liberatore for the Cardinals in Memphis, where Liberatore was up in AAA. I think he was as a 20 or 21-year-old guy.
21-year-old, yep.
And he struggled, right? He struggled during his time there because he was a 21-year-old pitcher in AAA. And then he's been there. I think he's been there over the course of 3 different seasons in AAA.
It's the same exact sequence.
This year, he's killing it, right? So, like, it's you got to remember these age compared to some of these players. Like, had Matt Liberatore, and Matt Liberatore fell down prospect list. He fell out of top 100s, even though he was a top, like, 20 guy, I think, at one point. And then when he was in AAA struggling, he started to fall down list. Well, like, had he been in killing it in high A, where he probably – quote unquote should have been
age-wise,
so that's just a wild concept. I want to read off a few numbers here. These are some StatCast numbers, which is we're blessed to have StatCast in AAA this year, which is awesome.
Thank you, baseball savant.
Exactly. And so these are a little bit outdated. I pulled these up earlier this week because I'm putting together in the future here a Brennen Davis article over at Northside Bound. But you mentioned the hard hitting the ball harder, right? So average exit velocity. I compared what their numbers look like now compared to what they would look like in terms of percentiles at the major league level.
Yeah.
So Brennen Davis's average exit velocity would be in the 27th percentile at MLB level. His hard hit percentage would be in the 23rd percentile. So those are numbers that are not great, but he's not consistently hitting the ball hard. If you look at his max exit velo, he would be in the 64th percentile in the major leagues.
Yeah, when he barrels it up, look out. I mean, and he's also had a couple foul balls this year where he's hooked down the left field line that I think he's hit at 108 or 109 that don't register on there too. So
yeah, and so it's like that max is there. He just needs to consistently do that a little bit more. Right. 2 more numbers based on what we're talking about. His whiff percentage would be 78th percentile in Major League Baseball, which is exactly what we're talking about. And the one that I caught my eye the most was his O swing percentage, which is the amount of times he's swinging at pitches out of the zone, right? How much he's swinging at that 100th percentile. He would have the best rate in all of Major League Baseball. He does not swing at pitches out of the zone.
He's being very calculated. The only time he would swing at pitches out of the zone, he's being more aggressive on first pitches, but he's definitely narrowed down that box room for where he's going to swing. And it's been impressive to watch. I mean, that's a seismic shift of what you saw last year with Brennen.
You saw a lot of chasing sliders out of the zone,
correct?
In past years, and that
shows that 1, you're healthy, and 2, like there's an active new approach that you're trying to implement.
Yep. There's a stretch where that was when people brought up concerns about Brennen Davis, that was the number 1 problem, was swinging at sliders out of the zone. That was it.
He fixed that problem. Now on to the next problem.
Yeah, so exactly. So there's a lot to like about what we've seen from Brennen Davis when you look past that slash line. I wanted to bring that up. I thought that you were a great guy to talk about that with. All right, let's move on to actually let's talk about a couple more prospects here before we move on to some veteran guys.
Go for it.
I want to talk about the Cam Sanders experience because it is quite the experience, man. I know that he's already become a fan favorite, but for Cubs fans, without even debuting in Chicago yet, the shimmies, all the swag that we see from Cam Sanders, his ability to crank the velo up into triple digits. We've seen a lot of walks, from Cam Sanders this year. That feels like the thing that he needs to get under control before he can make it up to Chicago.
I would agree. I mean, you see the electric right arm, 100.3 miles per hour he's topped out at. Slider, curveball, change, the eccentricity, the electricity. I mean, there was an outing in Columbus where leadoff walk, then a homer, then 5 consecutive strikeouts where nobody was even close. So just to be able to have that in the chamber, like you're playing with house money a little bit. But when you look at the overall stats, you're averaging, 11 walks per 9 innings, 12 walks per 9 innings. You're not going to be in the big leagues with that. Now, obviously, he can cut that down. This is his first full year as a reliever. I still think he's trying to harness and figure out how to harness being a reliever, because you see that first fastball that he throws, it's like 93, 94. And his 10th fastball is 97, 98. So he's kind of building up as a starter still. And I think the advice to him is like, you know what? You're going to go out there and throw 27 pitches. Just air it out, brother. Just throw as hard as you possibly can. Everything sharp, everything hard. So I think he's still trying to figure out that mentality for him. But, yeah, I mean, the strikeout numbers are great. Obviously, like, they're not making hard contact off them because the stuff is so nasty. But I would like to see that walk rate cut in about half.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to hint at here, is that the difference between starting and relieving, you have to, as a starter, think about generating weak contact. Yeah. You're also trying to generate whiffs, but you're trying to generate weak contact. And part of that is living on the edges. Part of that is sequencing correctly. Part of that is just overall command.
Well, it's also building up through at bats. Like, you're going to throw somebody different in your first at bat than you do in their second at bat. As a reliever, you're only expecting to face them once.
Yeah, and as a reliever, you still got to locate well and stuff like that. But so much of generating weak contact is just having nasty stuff. Yes. Like living with that nasty stuff in the zone, as opposed to like just thinking about it long term throughout the entire outing. So. I think it's probably that change in mentality that's probably tough, man. I can't even imagine making that, like, being a starter your entire life, right? Being a starter your entire life, transitioning into the bullpen halfway through the year last year, and then it's just different, It's different.
And this is one of your bullet points, so I'm gonna combine this.
Yeah,
Riley Thompson's going through that right now, where I've talked to Riley about it, and in his last start with the I-Cubs, 5 no-hit innings, and then they say, hey, you're going to move to the bullpen. And he's like, I've never done this in my life.
Yeah.
He's a starter at Louisville, through a lot of innings, started throughout the system. And he's like, I really had to reframe and recalibrate my approach. Like, now I know, relatively when I'm going to come in, what days I'm going to pitch. But going out there, I need to move much quicker. Just get out there, rock and fire. It's a completely different pace. It's a completely different rhythm. And when it comes to my stuff, like, I'm going to start pounding the zone a lot more early. Like, when you're a starter, you can live outside of the zone more and not, showcase guys in their first at bat, like your entire arsenal. You get one at bat here, show your entire arsenal, or just go out there and throw the piss out of the baseball.
Yeah.
So, Riley was one of your topics. I mean, I think Riley's a big league arm. Yes. He's somebody who could throw 4 pitches, upper 90s fastball. But it's something that he's made 5 relief outings, and especially for him, where he was such a rhythmic starting pitcher, to break out of that rhythm and to break out of that routine, it's going to take a while.
Riley's a very cerebral thinker when it comes to what he does on the mound, and I think that.
And as a reliever, it's the antithesis of that. You don't want to be a cerebral reliever. You want to go out there, especially when you have power stuff, to be like, all right, I'm going to think one thing. Power, power, power. I'm going to throw 98. I'm going to throw a 98 mile per hour fastball and an 88 mile per hour slider. So it really changes and reframes you as a pitcher and your identity as a pitcher. And for guys, it takes a long time.
Yeah, I think I mentioned it briefly a couple episodes ago with Greg Zumak. How I just didn't love the idea. It was before, I think it was before we knew that it was an actual move to the bullpen, because it was kind of wonky where he came in. I think he was the quote unquote piggybacker for Hendricks, and like, is this legit? What is this about? From my perspective, from a guy who really likes Riley Thompson throughout his entire time in the minors, I love him as a starting pitcher, dude. I know this stuff is good, and I know too that I have hit on over and over again.
How is he going to impact the Cubs? That's the question. I like Riley Thompson as a starter too, but do you like him more than Ben Brown? Do you like him more than Jordan Wicks? Do you like him more than Marcus Stroman? Do you like him more than Jameson Taillon? I think that's a loaded question right now, but Jameson Taillon's pitching for 3 more years in a Cubs uniform, more than likely, whether you like it or not. Do you like him more than Cade Horton? Do you like him more than Justin Steele? I just named 9 guys. Remember, there's a 5-man rotation.
Well, and I dig the idea of getting a guy up to Chicago and working him as whatever needs to happen. An arm is an arm. If he ends up converting back to the rotation, I love that. Like, I maybe hit that point home harder on this show than any other point in everything. So I love that idea, and I love the idea of whatever it takes to get him up to Chicago. I think that right now for this season, it just feels like a strange concept to move him to the bullpen here, because that depth, Ben Brown might be able to make a spot start. We've talked about that in the past, where that's an option. But you lose a guy like Rowanus Elias, you lose a guy like that could be a depth arm in Chicago and make a spot start. I think there's an option there for him to get some spot starts in Chicago this year.
I think there is too, but I think the prospects and the Ben Browns and the Jordan Wicks are closer to big league ready than you think.
I agree with that. I can see that. I think Ben Brown can make a spot start right now. I think that Ben Brown could come up and not only make a spot start, I think he can come up and
when you have the organizational depth like you do, and you have guys here, Hayden Wesneski apparently here right now. You have Caleb Killian, you have Ben Brown. You have 3 starters right now up in the big leagues that project as mid to 3-4 starters. That I love Riley, but I mean he's right there with them, but he's definitely not above them. So you have 5 starters up in the big leagues and 3 here. What would you rather have, a starter who's 9th on the depth chart, or would you rather have a reliever who can factor into the big leagues? So you really have to play your cards a little bit.
How do you envision Riley using that pitch mix? That he has a pretty deep repertoire of pitches in the bullpen, because that's another thing where that transition, typically you see a guy go down to utilizing 2 or 3 really solid pitches.
Well, he throws 5 pitches for strikes right now, and I think he's going to narrow it down to his best 3.
And he has some nasty stuff.
I don't think he'll be a 2-pitch reliever. I think that he'll work 3 pitches and 3 different eye levels and 3 different speed ranges. But I think he'll really center on. So he'll go to Ron Vallone, he'll go to Danny Holtzen, he'll go to guys in the big leagues and say, hey, what do you want me to center in on? It's like, okay, you throw these 5, take these 3 and completely master them.
I'll tell you something I'm not worried about is the development staff helping Riley Thompson convert successfully to the bullpen. I'm not worried about that in the slightest.
Yeah, I wouldn't be either.
Yeah.
I think they've had quite a track record recently.
All right, dude, let's talk about some veteran players. It's talking with you. Whenever I talk with you, it's always fun to get your perspective on some guys that are just some favorites around the clubhouse, some favorites on the field. And every year you seem to mention some veteran guys that are fun to be around, that seem to take some players under the wing and stuff like that. There's less veteran guys on this team than past years, which makes it fun for prospect followers. Whether the prospects or vets, what are some guys that you just have noticed guys like being around down in Iowa?
I mean, specifically over the last month, Kyle Hendricks. He's been incredible. Yeah, I've been in minor league baseball for 13 seasons, 14 years if you take out the COVID year, and he might be the best overall person I've been around. And he is by far, he and Jason Hayward are the 2 best rehabbers I've been around in terms of taking players under their wing, going out, watching bullpens of guys, giving his advice, being out there early, talking with the fans, talking with the staff, his general positivity, the way that he even talks with the catchers, with Bryce Wyndham, with Jake Washer, with Miguel Amaya and Dom Nunez before he got hurt. He's been the perfect person to be around this clubhouse for the last month. So I can't have enough things, nice things to say about Kyle Hendricks. And then guys who were with, Iowa as an actual player, not a major league rehabber. Nick Burdi's awesome, people. Just a great guy. He's been through so much adversity. And he told me, he's like, listen, like, I'm just here. I'm going to do my very best. And I just, if I don't get up to the big leagues, at least I tried. I mean, he was out of baseball essentially for 3 years, or not throwing a competitive pitch. He was joking with me during the NFL draft. He's like, hey, I don't know how much time I left. You got to call the Eagles, see if I can be their backup quarterback. It's the best time in sports, your best job in sports. And just a great guy to have in your bullpen. He brings everybody together. He's very kind, funny, just a good person to be around.
And a minor league Rule 5 draft pick, which is like, shout out to the scouting with the Cubs. Shout out to the front office for taking a flyer on a guy who hadn't thrown in 3 years.
Yeah.
And shout out to him for coming back this strong and making his MLB, making an impact on MLB.
Yeah, his Cubs debut. I mean, and it's cool for him. I mean, he's a Downers Grove guy. I mean, he grew up a diehard Cubs fan, and he persevered. And he essentially told his wife, he's like, "This is it. I'm going to give it my all after this year. If I don't get back up to the big leagues." and I don't get a great lucrative offer from overseas, I'm just going to go sell real estate. I mean, he's a really bright guy, and he's got his hands in a bunch of different ponds, and he's a great dude. I mean, he's just great to be around. Very humble. I mean, if I was throwing 100.3 miles per hour, I definitely would not be as humble. But yeah, he's one of my favorites this year.
You mentioned Hendricks and how much he's helping the team. Is there anybody that's been like tailing Hendricks and just like trying to get as much knowledge from him as possible?
I think everybody.
I
saw Nick Nider talking with him for a while. I saw Javier Assad talking with him for a while. Saw Riley Thompson talking with him for a while. Cam talking with him for a while. He was chatting with all the catchers the other day. So I think everybody knows, what Kyle can bring to the table, and how he's been able to utilize his stuff to have really an incredible career. So yeah, I think that the majority of the pitching staff is clinging to every word that Kyle is able to tell them.
Dude, just the idea of Cam Sanders and Kyle Hendricks being together, like two opposite players, opposite human beings, it feels like.
Opposite personalities, yeah.
It cracks me up, dude. Like just
be a fly on the wall during that conversation.
Yeah. I love that. All right, man. So you mentioned Nick Birdie, who's now up in Chicago. We saw Edwin Rios. We saw Mike Tauchman get called up to the big leagues. There are a lot of players down in Iowa that are damn near ready for Chicago, like real close to being ready for Chicago, probably ready now. It's just that the organization is set up in a really strange way where even though the major league team isn't performing super, super well, there's still a lot of really solid players on that squad.
Mm-hmm.
With those guys getting called up, is there anyone that you kind of envision as being especially ready for that call up next?
I'll give you two hitters and one pitcher. I'm going to exclude Miguel Amaya from this because I already talked about him, but I think that he and Nelson Velasquez would obviously be the next people up because I think that they are big leaguers for a long, long period of time. I'll go with the pitcher first, and my pitcher is Bailey Horn. He is nasty, man. 94 to 96 from the left side, knee buckling curveballs, pounds the zone, does not give a crap. I mean, he's just got that presence on the mound where it's just, hey, man, I'm going to throw my stuff. If you hit it, you can rename it, but you're not going to hit it, so you don't have to rename it. I love watching him pitch. I think he still needs to throw a little bit more strikes with the fastball, but in terms of left-handed relievers, I think that he's going to be a big leaguer. I think he's going to factor into the Cubs bullpen or a big league bullpen in a big way. Everything's sharp. He doesn't get hard contact. He misses a lot of bats. He missed more bats at the AA level than here at the AAA level, which is the normal progression, but still averaging about 12 strikeouts per 9 innings, not walking guys, opponents hitting under 200 against him. I think Bailey Horn is big league ready and could have the ascension that Brandon Hughes had last year in being the top lefty or one of the top lefties in the bullpen.
Yeah, I mean, if you can fill out a major league bullpen with two guys and with two lefties in Brandon Hughes and hopefully he can kind of continue to get back to where he was at last year and Bailey Horn, that's a success. Like you're done. Like that's I know that relievers are very volatile. I realize that, but also you throw those guys in the bullpen, there you go. You're set.
I think Bailey Horn, you get him up in the big leagues next year, and then for the next 5, it's 50 to 55 appearances with the 3 ERA, good strikeouts, great strikeout to walk ratio. I think that he's a big leaguer for a long time.
And really with Bailey, it's the really, really low opponent batting average. I don't know what it is right now, but I know last year was really strong. Starting off this year was really strong.
It was 080. It was 080 coming up to AAA level. Then he didn't give up in his first 4 innings. I like him a lot. And I think from a hitting perspective, there's 2 guys that stick out in my mind. Jake Slaughter has been more than impressive every single juncture of this season. The power's there. He's such a good raw athlete. He's got great hands. Power's there, 8 homers. He leads the team in runs batted in. He's tied for the team lead in doubles. The OBP is still there. I mean, the strikeout rate is 25, 27%, or at least it was earlier this week. But the fact is he's still walking. Power numbers are good. Just a big, strong dude. And he can hit to all fields. I mean, he had an opposite field home run in Columbus that I still think is traveling. Christopher Morel had the 460-foot homer in Philadelphia a couple of days ago. I think it actually might have been in Houston where he hit the home run. But Jake Slaughter has that type of juice, man. I mean, he's just big, strong, former football player. And he's impressed me. I mean, I thought that we were going to see 220, 240 with the power numbers. You're seeing, for the better part of the season, 300. Now I think the batting average has dropped to in the 280s, but he had 2 hits yesterday. He leads the team in multi-hit games. He's somebody that is surprised, impressed every single game for Iowa. Whether he goes 0 for 5, makes a nice play in the field, or he goes 2 for 4 and has a single to right and then a double to left. Like, the spray chart for him is great. I think that he surprised a lot of people. He could play second, he could play third. I think that he could probably play outfield too, although he hasn't with Iowa. So from a pure hitting standpoint, I really like him. I think that he could be a big leaguer. And then Darius Hill, all Darius Hill does is hit. He had a go-ahead RBI single yesterday, batting average creeping up to 300. Last year hit 306, minor league hit king. Obviously to start off the season he didn't play as much because you have Brennen Davis, Nelson Velasquez, Jonathan Perlaza, Mike Talkman. I mean, there's a log jam in the outfield with guys who have more big league priority. And Darius like, you know what? When I go in, I'm just going to hit. And he does. I mean, and at some point, like, hitting's going to get you to the big leagues. He's a good clubhouse guy, doesn't strike out much, fine defender at all 3 outfield positions. I think if Darius Hill gets called up to the big leagues right now, you're getting 1 for 4 every day. You wake him up at 2:00 in the morning and there's a fire in your hotel. It's like, you have to go there on a baseball field, play right now. It's like, all right, I'm going to go get 2 hits.
With Darius, I think I've noticed a big difference in his defense in the outfield. I think it's gotten way better.
It has.
And that is huge. That is huge for what role he could play on a major league team. If you have a guy with his profile at the plate, but he is unable to play center field and he's just average in the corners and on defense, that's not a super valuable major league player. But you take that same offensive profile and you got a guy that can play center field and he can play some pretty damn good defense in the corners. That's way different.
There's just one factor with Darius that you need more of, and you need just a little bit more power.
Yeah.
You need a little bit more power. He had 9 home runs last year. He had almost 50 extra base hits. But just need a little bit more power. And I'm not saying I need 12 home runs, but give me 8. Give me 6.
Yeah, and with the homers you mentioned the 9 home runs last year, it was less of like I wouldn't at all call it raw power. Like there's no raw power with Darius. He was really, when he got those 9 home runs, he was very like hunting his pitches. He was very good at that, right? Like I think 3 or 4 of them were on first pitch of the game, leading off the game. Like it was.
He had 2 with us, and he had 2 with Tennessee.
Yeah, he feasted on guys. Just, let's just get it over the plate. And he's like, oh well, I'm going to take it over the fence.
Yes. He ambushed. I mean, he knew that guys were going to throw him a 92-mile-per-hour meatball, and he hit it 378 feet.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, those are both guys. Both those hitters, Slaughter and Hill, are both guys you need in an organization. That if you call them up to they're great depth. If you call them up to the big leagues, they can hold their own. I think another guy that hasn't, I think you mentioned him in the outfield depth, Jonathan Perlaza is a dude that just kind of gets it done, man. He's good.
Switch hitter, had a nice spinning double down the left field line yesterday. He is so powerful. I mean, you saw last year that the power could really take shape. He had 60 extra base hits. Haven't seen that as much here. He did have back-to-back days with home runs. I think he's still trying to find his footing at AAA, but his raw juice is there, man. I mean, if he can, somehow get into a 5 home runs in 12-game stretch, look out.
Yeah, and you mentioned Nick Birdie's the quarterback for the Eagles. Jonathan Perlaza can be right back in the backfield with him at running back.
That yesterday, it's like if you go 4th and 1 and you need somebody to get you a yard or get you a last-second touchdown. I was talking to Ron Valone about this because he was a former college football player. He's like, I'm giving it to Perlaza, and he's laughing his way all the way to the goal line.
I love it, man. Yeah, it's just a fun group. I want to point out one more guy here, and he's less prospecty, I guess, because he's already made his major league debut. He's definitely an older guy. Jared Young has been really.
I knew you were going to bring it up.
Right? Like the thing that stood out the most with Jared Young for me is the walk rate, which up to this point is previously, every other year in his career, he's been a guy that has not walked a ton. Like, that's not his thing.
Yeah, he's second up the team in walks right now.
Yeah, I think he's third in the entire system in walk rate, which is not normal from Jared Young, and it shows that he's continuing to learn. He's continuing to work on things, and that's awesome.
You look at the batting average. He and the BABIP gods have to have a conversation. He hit 3 balls during the doubleheader, 105 and above, and all 3 of them were either caught on line drives or a miraculous diving play by Aaron Shackelford at first that he's never made in his life. Got to the point where he's like laughing walking into the dugout. He got like a seeing-eyed single afterwards, and he just throws up his hands. It's like, finally, it all evens out. Hits the ball hard, works really hard. I think what really helped him was everything that's gone on in the last year. You go up to the big leagues, make your big league debut. Then you get optioned. You come to Iowa. You hit a walk-off home run against Toledo. 12 hours, you get optioned to end the season for the I-Cubs. You go then play for Team Canada. You hit a home run in the World Baseball Classic, and then you come here. So I think Jared's a big leaguer. I think Jared on certain teams right now would play pretty routinely up in the big leagues because it's a quality at bat. His lefty-righty splits aren't as drastic as they've been in years past. The walk rate is up. The hard contact's there. I would like for you to do the velocity test with him in comparison to the big leaguers. It would probably be above 50%. He's a player that, if he's on the Cubs, if this is last year and what he's doing this year was coming into motion, I think that he would be up in the big leagues more. I think he would have been up in the big leagues in 2020 as well. I think that for a team like Oakland, he'd be playing every single game and probably fourth in their lineup. I think he's a really good player. I think that he's really made himself marketable as well because, when he came into the system, remember, he was drafted as a second baseman. They say, you know what, you're going to play first. You're going to play the corners. Well, he's played first, second, third, left, right with the I-Cubs. And he is the first person out on the field taking grounders, working on his backhand, forehand, tireless worker. I like him. I know that he's 27. But what I saw in the World Baseball Classic this year really impressed me. Like, I do think that he's a big leaguer.
Yeah, I feel like everybody loves JY, and so I'm rooting a little extra hard for him.
Big fly for JY.
Yeah, exactly. All right, man.
He's one of my favorites. Like Levi Jordan, Darius Hill. I mean, they've all been together for a long time, so they know each other well. But like that dynamic, I mean, they're all 3 of the great clubhouse guys, and they get along.
Yeah, and I feel like in Iowa, you need, because there are fewer vets, right? Like traditional, like 38, age 30 and up guys in Iowa this year. You need guys like JY and Levi and stuff like that are really like bringing the clubhouse together
and know the Cubs organization well. They know the guys coming through the system. They've been around for a while. They know manager Marty Peavy really well. So, he had Mike Talkman now up in the big leagues. David Bodie's been a really nice presence for Iowa. He's 30 years old now. But it's always a quality at bat from David. He's played a little bit of everywhere, and he's been
playing some short.
Yeah, he's played some short. He's been really nice to have with Iowa. Just a lot of versatility there. That's the hardest hit ball for the I-Cubs this year.
Is it David?
115.6.
that has never been a problem for David Bodie throughout his career, is hitting the ball hard. He's always put up those max exit velo numbers.
Correct, but when you're 30 years old, the concern there is bat speed. Do you still have it? And he's showing that he certainly still has it.
I think that is a terrific example of, like, we know that David Bodie can be a decent enough bench bat in Chicago, and the fact that he's an Iowa, that's the story of this team. I feel like it's just, there's a whole bunch of guys that can hold their own if they got called up.
That's organization. That's organization. I mean, you look at the 25th, 26th man in 2021. It is so much different now with Iowa. Look who's with the Iowa Cubs: Hayden Wesneski, Ben Brown, Caleb Killian, Keegan Thompson just got optioned. Like, those are 4 guys that, if you look at it 12, 18 months ago, they're in the big league. So the fact that they're here shows the organizational depth that they have right now. And you have Kyle Hendricks waiting in the wings. So the talent is just so much better than it was in years past. And I think it's something that Cubs fans should be really excited about.
And it trickles down, right? It trickles down that depth that goes down to Iowa. Then there's no room for them for the guys in Tennessee and Iowa. So they stay in. You got Chase Strumpf. Chase Strumpf is ready to get bumped up to Iowa. He's still in Tennessee. You got guys. Hayden McGeary is making his way up fast. I don't think he's ready for Iowa quite yet, but you got a guy like that. BJ Murray, he's been terrific.
BJ Murray has a 30-game on base streak. He's been one of the best hitters in minor league baseball for the last month. I mean, if you look at this 1-2 years ago, he's already up at the AAA level.
Yeah.
Gordon Wicks is probably ready to be in AAA.
Yeah, exactly. So it makes the entire system fun. I love when Iowa is good. I love when there's all these prospects in Iowa.
Oh, we have something in common.
I love having you on the show, man. Where are you at next week? What's next on the docket for Alex Cohen?
Yeah, so we're currently on a 12-game road trip. We're playing the last game of Series 1 in Indianapolis. We have a nice off day in Nashville, Tennessee on Monday, and then a 6-game series in Nashville during Memorial Day weekend. So I'm sure there won't be a lot of people and screaming, young adults in the right field picnic area or anything like that in Nashville. But first time going back to Nashville since 2019. Love it down there. Guys are playing well. Swept the doubleheader yesterday. Back to 9 games over 500. And if it weren't for the Norfolk Tides being 20 games over and winning games at a 750 clip, you're probably talking about the Iowa Cubs being the best team in the International League. So it's been fun.
I love it. All right, man. There's a new Twitter handle for you, right?
Well, I mean, new, old. Yeah, meet the new boss, same as the old boss. Voice of Cohen has vanished into thin air. Somebody stole my password twice. I talked to Elon. He couldn't quite get it done.
You had a one-on-one with him, right?
yeah, not happy with that. So now we're Voice of Cohen 2. Voice of Cohen 2. It's the clone. So, give a follow at Voice of Cohen 2. Normally in my old account, I would talk about all things sports. Now I'm just narrowing down Cubs, and there's a lot to talk about, so I'm enjoying it.
Yeah, be sure to give Alex a follow there. Well worth the follow. One of the best follows. I mean, I have that Twitter list that I put together a while back. You can go find that. I think you can find that on my page. Go follow the Twitter list that has all the Cubs prospect Twitterers, and you are one of the best. So go give him a follow.
Keep going. Keep my praises.
And you guys can follow me on Twitter at Out of the Vines. You can find the podcast wherever you listen. This will be up on YouTube. You guys are probably listening on Tuesday morning on YouTube at Northside Bound, on Apple, on Spotify, on Stitcher, on all kinds of weird platforms that I've never heard of in my entire life. We're all there. If there is a platform that we are not on that you would like us to be on, reach out to me, tweet at me, and let me know that I need to add it there. Thank you guys so much for listening. We'll be back in one short week. We'll talk soon.